Good morning, eighth grade students. This is Ms. Teresic. I am coming to you to remind you of some of the things that we want you to be working on during this extended break. Remember that every day we would like you to do 30 minutes of independent reading. The book is your choice, but please make sure that you are logging the date that you're reading, how much you are reading, or how many pages you are reading at a time, how long you are spending during your reading, and then, of course, the title of the book that you are choosing. And then we had some questions kind of crop up via email and Google Classroom yesterday in regards to the log. The log is really your choice. You can do a Google Doc and use a table like what is in your overview document from yesterday, or you could log in your notebook. Personally, I think it's easier to do a Google Doc, and you'll take up a little bit less pages that way, but it's absolutely your choice. Grab a piece of notebook paper, that kind of thing is all student done. And then the other thing that we would like you to work on during your extended break is some journaling, kind of taking in the world around you and recording your thoughts and reactions to it. Mrs. Decker shared with you a list from that overview document yesterday that shows a lot of different opportunities you have to respond. You could also find your own. You could Google search what's going on around you. Maybe you're not talking about a specific text. Maybe you're just taking a minute to reflect on kind of your personal reactions to what's happening. The seed ideas are on the overview document just to serve as kind of launch points if you don't know what to write about, or if you don't know maybe what kind of ideas to compare. You don't have to write in any particular order to them or to any of them, period. And then the last thing that we're going to be working on is your 30 minutes of language arts work. We are continuing with the author's craft bend. And today we're just kind of building off of what Ms. Decker showed you yesterday. If at any point you are confused as to what you are supposed to be working on or how things could look or should look in a notebook, or can you write something on a Google Doc, please do not hesitate to reach out to your language arts student or to your language arts teacher. We are all working together on supporting your language arts content at this time. So your teacher, even though like Ms. Decker did yesterday's video and I'm doing today's video, all of us know kind of what the plan is every day. So don't feel like you have to email a teacher that maybe you haven't worked with before. You can go ahead and email your regular language arts teacher. All right, today's language arts lesson is focusing on a new text from yesterday. Today we're going to be reading The White Umbrella. You'll find that linked on commonlit.org. And today we're going to be talking about a few different literary techniques or author's craft moves than we did yesterday. Today we're specifically focusing on the use of motif, foreshadowing, symbolism, and conflict in The White Umbrella. But if you notice something that kind of connects to Ms. Decker's lesson yesterday about dialogue, imagery, symbolism is there a second time, or if you want to talk about the exposition, you are more than welcome to. These are adding tools, they are kind of detailed development tools, and you'll find a lot of these different literary devices in lots of different works. So just because one lesson doesn't focus on one, that doesn't mean you can't talk about it in your notebook paragraphs. You're more than welcome to. And I think if you do, it kind of just adds a level of detail and a level of depth that adds interest to any sort of discussion work that you may be having about the pieces. All right, so if we're looking at The White Umbrella, it is a slightly longer piece than yesterday, so we won't get the entire piece read out loud on camera like Ms. Decker did yesterday. We're going to read just kind of a chunk of it for the lesson work today. If you want to have it read aloud, that is an option on commonlit.org. It's kind of that robotic-y voice, but it is an option that you have. When we take a look at The White Umbrella, I do notice a few things right away, but I want us to get kind of started in the text. So we're going to read from paragraph 1 to about paragraph 15 to start, and then we're going to talk about what we noticed before we read a little bit further. All right, go ahead and follow along for this section. When I was 12, my mother went to work without telling me or my little sister. Not that we need the second income. The lilt of her accent drifted from the kitchen up to the top of the stairs where Mona and I were listening. No, said my father in a barely audible voice, not like the Lee family. The Lees were the only other Chinese family in town. I remembered how sorry my parents had felt for Mrs. Lee when she started waitressing downtown the year before, and so when my mother began coming home late, I didn't say anything and tried to keep Mona from saying anything either. But why shouldn't I? She argued. Lots of people's mothers work. Those are American people, I said. So what do you think we are? I can do the Pledge of Allegiance with my eyes closed. Nevertheless, she tried to be discreet, and if my mother wasn't home by 5:30, we would start cooking by ourselves to make sure dinner would be on time. Mona would wash the vegetables and put on the rice. I would chop. For weeks, we wondered what kind of work she was doing. I imagined she was selling perfume, testing dessert recipes for the local newspaper. Or maybe she was working for the florist. Now that she had learned to drive, she might be delivering boxes of roses to people. I don't think so, said Mona as we walked to our piano lesson after school. She would have hit something by now. A gust of wind littered the street with leaves. Maybe. We better hurry up, she went on, looking at the sky. It's going to pour. But we're too early. Her lesson didn't begin until 4 o'clock, mine until 4:30, so we usually tried to walk as slowly as we could. And anyway, those aren't the kinds of clouds that rain. Those are cumulus clouds. We arrived out of breath and wet. Oh, you poor, poor dear, said old Miss Crossman. Why don't you call me the next time it's like this out? If your mother won't drive you, I can come pick you up. And I'm going to just pause there really quickly and kind of skim back up towards the top to discuss what kinds of things I have already found. Now, yesterday, Ms. Decker led you through a lesson that really started to look for these authors' craft to moves by choosing a spot in the text and really zooming in and rereading it and just kind of figuring out what is it that you're noticing and what kinds of things do you want to note. And if you're doing a first read, that is like totally a way to go. That's what I'm going to do right now. It's a piece that I'm not incredibly familiar with, so it's kind of easier for me to just start at a spot and just reread it really quickly and kind of figure out what's going on here. So I'm noticing compared to the piece yesterday, the exposition is a lot different. It is a little bit more slow moving. It does introduce a conflict right away, or at least a conflict of the piece right away. In sentence one, we know that this mom is keeping something from her daughters, and the narrator doesn't really know what to do about it. Um, but it takes a little bit of time to really introduce who all of these characters are and kind of what their motivations are in the story. Whereas Ruthless yesterday just kind of jumped right in and got down to business. And it was kind of up to the reader to kind of figure out what had happened beforehand, so they could make sense of what was happening in the moment. This is a little bit more slow moving and it kind of tells the reader a little bit more of what is going on in the story and really grounding us in those details. We know that this is a story about two kind of younger daughters who kind of idolize this mother, and the mother is doing things that they aren't really aware of. And one of the daughters, anyway, is kind of struggling to understand that. We also have a little bit of dialogue that introduces some heritage and culture ideas. And I think those are where we start to see some of these kind of first motif ideas. There are two motifs that I kind of found all throughout. And the first one talks about family, where we're talking about this mother, daughter, and father relationship, how the daughters kind of step in when the mom is not there to kind of keep things on schedule. It seems like it's very much their responsibility. And they're happy to do it. Like that's what families do in the story. So that's what they are going to continue to do. But the second thing that I noticed is this idea of Chinese ways versus American ways. The author very clearly labels this family as Chinese in the fourth paragraph, where it says the Lees were the only other Chinese family. So that implies that the family that the story is mostly focusing around is also Chinese. But then in the next couple paragraphs, so paragraph 6 kind of brings up, comparing paragraph 5 and paragraph 6, it brings up the idea of kind of the American standard is that mom and dads both work, and that's very normal. Whereas in Chinese culture, It seems like the mother doesn't necessarily work as often as the father, and that they kind of work because they need to, not because they want to. So there's a little bit of that kind of culture barrier that then these daughters are kind of stuck in the middle of. And one daughter seems like she's more supportive of kind of the Chinese way, and then the other one is kind of like, okay, whatever, we're in America, we are American, this is the new normal for us. And we see that with Mona's character. So the dialogue, kind of building off of that ruthless piece from yesterday, where we introduce character motivations and actions, does come up again here for sure, bringing up the motifs of family and culture as well, maybe a little bit of identity as well. The next thing that I noticed was some symbolism, and we're going to have to keep reading to kind of get that. So we're scrolling back down after paragraph 15, where they're at Mrs. Crossman's house for that piano lesson. No, that's okay, I answered. Mona wrung her hair out on Miss Crossman's rug. We just couldn't get the roof of our car to close, is all. We took it to the beach last summer and got sand in the mechanism. I pronounced the last word carefully, as if the credibility of my lie depended on its middle syllable. It's never been the same, I thought for a second. It's a convertible. Well, then make yourselves at home. She exchanged looks with Eugenie Roberts, whose lesson we were interrupting. Eugenie smiled good-naturedly. The towels are in the closet across from the bathroom. Huddling at the end of Miss Crossman's 9-foot leather couch, Mona and I watched Eugenie play. She was a grade ahead of me and, according to school rumor, had a boyfriend in high school. I believed it. She had auburn hair, blue eyes, and I noted with a particular pang a pure white folding umbrella. All right, so this next section kind of introduces what I saw as maybe a hint to a symbol. If you're looking at paragraph 18, that one right at the top of the screen there, this object, which seems kind of random, but it is part of the title. So as the reader of the piece, it seems less random knowing that. I do think that this umbrella is going to mean something more than just something that keeps off the rain. And there are a few interesting things about this umbrella that I want to note. Firstly, it is specifically called a white umbrella, which kind of goes back to that motif idea of like American versus Chinese, and maybe that potential conflict there. It's another way that the author is building up tension by introducing some of that conflict and not really explaining it all out. The reader definitely has to stop and think, well, why is this such a big deal to this girl? Why is this object going to become so important to her? We also kind of get a clue that this umbrella is going to come up more than once, because right now it's just laying there being an umbrella, but it's the title of the story. So we know that there's something more to expect from this umbrella. I think because we have this author's detail note of, I noted with a particular pang, we kind of get that sense that this author, or that this narrator, excuse me, really, really wants this umbrella. Something about this makes her extremely jealous, and we're going to have to keep reading to find out what it means. But right now, I can jot in my notebook, I think that the umbrella symbolizes the idea of want. And I'm going to ask myself, well, why does she want this umbrella so much? Is it because it's just like everybody else, or is it something more? Moving on to this next piece of dialogue, kind of starting at paragraph 19. I can't see, whispered Mona. So clean your glasses. My glasses are clean. You're in the way. I looked at her. They look dirty to me. That's because your glasses are dirty. Eugenie came bouncing to the end of her piece. Oh, just stupendous. Miss Crossman hugged her, then looked up as Eugenie's mother walked in. Stupendous, she said again. Oh, Mrs. Roberts, your daughter has a gift, a real gift. It's an honor to teach her. And I'm not going to read very much further because I want to note that there's some dialogue usage there that's a little bit different than kind of introductory or expository dialogue, where we're really kind of introducing characters and who they are, where instead we've met both of these characters before, and now we're just using them to continue kind of some of that character development. We get this sisterly relationship. It seems like Mona and the narrator don't always agree on things as a a sister in a large family, I do know that that sometimes does happen. And so they kind of have this bickering moment that is very realistic. So we have kind of this true to life moment. But I also think this could also work as a piece of foreshadowing. We know that the author tries to keep everyone from knowing that the mother is working from the very top part of the story, scrolling back up, where she says that she wants to kind of keep it secret in paragraph 4. Um, so when my mother began coming home late, I didn't say anything and tried to keep Mona from saying anything either. I didn't catch it at the time, but now I can see that this part of narration really helped foreshadow or give some of that clue to both some conflict between her and her sister that's kind of coming up again in this dialogue section. Um, but we also introduce the idea that Mona maybe is a little bit of a blabbermouth. She likes to share things, and then the narrator really does not. And this is something that is going to continue to go on. They kind of bicker the entire time, and they're always at odds with one another. So I get a really cool family dynamic, a very real to life family dynamic. But I also get kind of an increase in conflict, and I also get another clue as to what to expect in the future. I think that I'm going to see this relationship between Mona and the narrator continue to kind of come to a head and maybe blow up and cause more conflict, or at least it's going to lead to kind of this main conflict of this mother working without telling anybody. All right, so really quickly, we've talked about motif so far with family and culture and some identity. And then we've talked about foreshadowing, giving clues to what's going to happen in the future. Some symbolism with this white umbrella and what does that stand for? It's not literally an umbrella. What else is it? Is it this kind of quest for sameness or kind of accepting of being an American, and what does that mean to the Chinese heritage? That is also a very large part of this family. Is it throwing it away, or is it somehow bringing it together? That's definitely something interesting to continue on in your discussion or your paragraph work in your notebook. And then we've also kind of reviewed some dialogue so far. The thing that kind of runs throughout the story that isn't really clear to pin down in specific moments are conflict. There are pieces that you can note, like I've noted at the very top, this very first sentence that introduces conflict, and also some dialogue pieces with the father and the mother, between like the Lee family and then this family, and then also between Mona and the narrator. All right, so we have lots of things to kind of think about and notate in your notebook. All right, the way that I'm going to really track this ongoing usage of foreshadowing and conflict and symbolism is kind of a secondary way to what Ms. Decker showed you yesterday, where she chose a spot in the text to study and reread and talk about what you notice. Um, the kind of second way, or the flip side to that, is to look for patterns of the craft from across the text and to really talk about how they develop or how they kind of deepen in detail, which I think is a really great way to notate pieces of conflict, because we know conflict in a plot structure starts kind of low and then increases as we near that climax. And then we should expect a resolution at some point in the story. But the best way to track that is to really go through and notice how you see it developing over the entire text rather than just focusing on one scene. You'll have to work on a couple of different scenes and really kind of compare them. You could do the same with foreshadowing. I think the umbrella on paragraph 18 is kind of a more obvious example of foreshadowing because it ties into that title detail. But another one that, again, I missed the first time and it took me a while to kind of think about it um, as I reread was this idea of Mona wanting to blurt out things and then the narrator wanting to keep things kind of secret. So we see that by kind of comparing multiple scenes together. Right, in your notebook, we want to remember some independent work. Remember, watch this video all the way through. We're almost done. And then log into commonlit.org to do your reading for today. Again, today's text is The White Umbrella. Yesterday's was Ruthless. If you didn't quite get that done, perfect time to go back and reread. And you could do some really cool comparison things with the different craft moves that you see. Your expectations for your work today are that you've both finished reading The White Umbrella and then skim and reread some sections looking for motif use, foreshadowing, symbolism, and conflict. Again, those literary devices that really kind of need to be compared across the text to really see the depth of their kind of creation and their use in the text, rather than just one scene and going really in depth with it. And then we want you to expand your thinking of the text. And one of the techniques that maybe you see a lot, or maybe you're going to try your hand at trying to find two or three of them, maybe you're going to try and find all of them, or dip into some of that work from yesterday as well. We want you to write your thinking in your notebook, or a few people asked a question like they forgot theirs in their locker at school. Can they do it on paper? That is also fine. Just make sure you're logging a couple of new paragraphs in your notebook. And since it's a different piece than yesterday, I would also recommend that you kind of track the title that you're currently working with to keep your notes nice and organized based on the lesson and analysis work that we're doing today. All right. Do not forget to reach out if you have a question. If you just want some quick clarification, or if there's a couple of things, you can address all of that in an email to your language arts teacher. Don't forget to do your independent reading and your journaling, as well as this independent work. Ask questions if you need to, and have a great rest of your day.